everybody, welcome back to Sprueverse, my scale model universe, and this is part 2 of Build the Bubble Ship from the motion picture Oblivion starring Tom Cruise. And what I wanted to do really is sort of just give you an update of where we are and talk about that process. Now, as you know, in the part 1 we went into excruciating detail on some of these things, but I think it's important if you're going to tackle a resin kit. And that got us to this stage. So let me take you through what I've done and where we are, starting with the tail section here. As you can see, what I've done is I have actually joined the front cockpit section to the rear tail here. That process was quite complicated, so I want to talk about that first. As we know, last time we were together, we talked about this bar here. Now it's actually 2 balls, and I'll explain that in a minute, but what you can see is what I had to do is, you can see here, what I've done is I actually decided to cut this in half. Now the reason I did that is because, as we know, when I was test fitting the 2 engines in the previous episode, I couldn't get them to line up properly. So now, as you can see, now I'm going to have a little bit of a struggle here, so I apologize, but I think you'll get the idea, is they are both absolutely flush. Now this one, there we go. Yeah, they're absolutely flush now. There we go, we're in camera. And so I'm pretty happy with that, and obviously the way Randy had designed this kit, it gave you, the reason why that bar was there is so that these engines could turn if you wanted to turn them. The same is true with the gun turret inside the cockpit. That is also free to turn as well, and I think we'll probably leave that the way it is. But unfortunately, I had an issue from the very beginning when the kit arrived. This bar was already bent, which led me to believe that Randy was trying to get this straight. Unfortunately, what had happened in the molding process, there was a hole that was bored into one half, but not into the other. The other half was just a solid piece of resin. And so the bar, and as it went through, it just wasn't level. And I was really concerned. I did start to try and bend this on a vise, but this pipe was going to collapse on me for sure. And every time I tacked it, I was really concerned about cracking the resin. So, but my thought on it is for my purposes, I'm going to be displaying this this bubble ship essentially in this position, and you can assume it's landed, not landed, taking off, or what have you. Maybe it rotates before it takes off and then settles in this position for landing. I've seen some frame grabs from the movie, and it looks perfectly acceptable in this position. And besides which, from an aesthetic point of view, it will read as flush. Now, fortunately, I don't have to worry about this seam. I just have to worry about getting enough epoxy in there to get this level and leave it overnight. And that should do the trick. But because it is supposed to rotate, you want to see that seam. That suggests that it can actually rotate from an engineering perspective. So anyway, both the bar now works perfectly, and once I had made the decision to actually go ahead and cut this in half and then line it all up, everything kind of fell into place really. As I have mentioned, I have attached now the rotor to the front engine core, which also houses the cockpit in the front, which is this piece here, and that attaches like so. So you really start to see this kit coming alive. So that's sort of That's very exciting, and I'm very happy with that. What I have also done is just primarily, or I should say primer-wise, sorry, the mouth isn't working. The words are all there, but the mouth isn't working. And as Lou Del Massa once said, take all the words, move them around as you need, and you'll find a sentence there. I'm going to say the same thing. Move the words around and you'll figure out there's a sentence there that makes sense, I promise you. But anyway, I've put on some primer, and the primer is always there to sort of clue me in to where I need to continue to putty and clean things up. I've given a base coat of the black because I wanted to sort of get an idea of what we're going to see and not see. The gun turret, once the guns are actually attached, top and bottom, I'm not going to glue. I'll glue the pieces together inside, but there's enough flex in this entire unit to allow me to pull it out gently. And so that will, once it's all, and you can see now actually it's actually cooperating, we'll be able to move the gun turrets. Whoops, I've just lost the bottom gun. We'll be able to move these gun turrets, and that should be a nice little feature for the kit once it's all complete. So that sort of gets me to that position. Now, in order to glue these two halves together, I am using my go-to, which is 5-minute epoxy. I use JB World, and it's a nice clear resin. It sets up in about, you have 5 or 6 minutes to sort of get it all stirred up and get it all slathered on, and then overnight it's not going anywhere. I mean, it'll hold 1,400 pounds, so that was perfect. Then what I always like to do, and I'm sure you guys know this already, so forgive me if I'm telling you something you already know, but what I do like to do is I like to put masking tape about 5 millimeters out on both edges, so that I don't get any of the putty that I'm using on any other part of the model. Primarily because I want to protect seam lines, and I don't want to be sanding something I don't have to sand. And as you can see, I've gotten a really nice result with that. You get this sort of nice line, and you're able to sand that down and smooth that out, and that's going to come together quite nicely. There's a sort of groove here that's part of the actual framework of the ship, so that stays. So I'm really only sanding on that back half, I think that'll come together quite nicely. I had already sanded down the tail section, and that has disappeared, so there's no seam there at all. I've got some moderate sanding to do, but this putty sands beautifully, and we'll get a really nice result once we start finishing it. Now, the way I will finish it is I like these Tamiya sponges. You can wet sand with them and you get a really fantastic result. I usually start at 400, which is more than enough to get this sanded down. And then I'll go to 600 to take out a lot of the scratches. And 600 usually is more than enough to get this to a point where I can actually do some fine finish work, where I see little chips and dabs. Once I've got this to where I want it and everything is smooth and finished, I'll go ahead and put one last primer coat on it, primer filler, and that should get rid of any of the gouges or scratches. Now, in this particular kit, I do have some very odd panel lines here. And so one of the things I'm probably going to do is I'm going to, where my panel lines are just not salvageable, I'm going to putty everything in, make it smooth, and start again with my panel lines. Fortunately, this side is relatively clean, so I've got a good map. I've got a really nice map that I can follow on the opposite side, and that's what I'll do. Now, where I have little pieces that are supposed to be smaller squares, what I'm going to do is, rather than make panel lines, I'm going to take some literally 0.50. I use this is great stuff for diffusion in models, but it's also great stuff for panels, to create raised panels on kits. I use it all the time. It's readily available from any of your hobby shops, or you can get it online. It's the 0.050. It's half a millimeter thickness, and it works really well. And I'll cut that into the various squares that I need, and it can lay across seam lines. It can do all kinds of things to really add a nice finish to this. So that's the cockpit and the body. We talked briefly about these engine balls. They were a bit of a struggle, I have to be honest, to come together. So I have used, in order to fill a lot of these gaps, I started with some Milliput. I let that dry up overnight, sanded that down, and then I finished it with, obviously, my glazing putty. This is my Bondo glazing putty, my go-to glazing putty. And I have got everything prepped now, and so once this is all sanded smooth, this should be ready to go. And of course, these engines will be white. The cowls are going to be a silver color, but I'm going to age those down and give them some exhaust wax when I weather this, because I think that'll look really cool. So those will be cleaned up. Now, it did come with some clear, for these, they're supposed to be lights. Now, I'm not lighting this, but there are some clear pieces that come with the kit. Now, one of them, sadly, I can't find. I only have 3. I'm supposed to have 4. So I am going to use the ones that are available for my lights. But for the guns, there's a clear piece that goes in the back of the gun right here. I'm not going to use those. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my Solares. Here's my Solares, and this is a fantastic little tool. If you don't know about this, you should. It cures instantly with a UV light. Instantly cures. Of course, don't point it at your eyes like I did. What an idiot. But it cures really nicely. So what I'm going to do is I will paint these white. I will pour some Solares into these. It will find its own level, and then instantly that will cure. But I won't do that until I'm finished. And I've also noticed that the bottom of these guns obviously have to be primed as well, because you'll see them. So a lot of finish work to do there. The legs, I have, what I've done with the legs is, here it is, couldn't find it. So this is my leg mount. I've glued this together, and this will obviously go here. Now, it does need some sanding, and it's going to be flush. I am not going to try to putty that up. I'm going to actually leave it like that, because I think from an engineering perspective it's going to look really cool. But that will house the legs, and I have test fitted everything, and everything is going together quite nicely. Here's your rears, your rear legs, and here are the forward legs, like this, and then the whole thing is going to be placed on a plaque with a brass rod that will hold it down like that, and we are off to the races. So you can start to see this machine is really it's really starting to come together. You can really start to see it now. You can feel it. You know, we're sort of down to the brass tacks of it all. But getting to this point was quite a labor of love, I have to say, because as we know in the previous episode, we had an awful lot of prep to do. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to continue to do some light sanding on everything. I'm going to get this to where it's ready to paint, and we will start to paint it. So the next time we get together for this kit, we should be actually ready for decals and some final weathering and stuff like that. And I think what we'll do is we'll do decals and final weathering as a show, so that we can see the whole thing coming together and look at how that's done. But overall, I would say that with a little bit of time and patience, this comes together quite nicely. I would say the bulk of the time is cleaning and puttying and prepping everything. But once everything is prepped and put together, it's a great kit, and it's a lot of fun. But it does take a little bit of sweat equity to get there. But we've got there. Some of the biggest challenges you're going to find with putting this kit together is fit. And that's true of all resin kits, unfortunately. Now, some are better than others. And it may just be also, for whatever reason, the pieces that I got, just didn't fit perfectly. But that's part of the challenge of putting these kinds of kits together. So it is something you should expect, but nothing is insurmountable. And at the end of the day, it comes together quite nicely. And I think the results are going to be really stunning. The only other thing I'll say is, including it in the kit, Randy does give you a sample sheet of the decals for this. So here they are, and mine were a little tattered from the trip over. There's not much you can do about it, but kindly, when he sends you your reference pictures, he sends you the full sheet. And I would recommend everybody learn how to make their own decals, because it's easy and it's a lot of fun. You can buy all kinds of good quality decal sheets online, and they're easy to use. You're going to put them into your printer, and you're going to print your decals from the image he provides. Now, you must do this on an inkjet. It's very important. It has to be an inkjet printer. If it isn't, it won't work. So you're going to print them, and when you've printed them, your sheet comes out and it looks like this. And it's a thing of beauty. Here it is. And all my decals are here. They're beautiful, they're crisp, they're clean. And when it comes out of the printer, what you want to do is let it dry for a few minutes, and then you're going to want to spray this with an acrylic clear varnish spray. You're going to hit it a couple of times, let it dry, leave it for a few hours, hit it again, let it dry, and hit it one more time, and then leave it overnight, and you're good to go. Now, these are not individually cut. You're going to have to cut them yourself, which means you're going to have to be really, really careful. Now, what I recommend you do is do not cut up to the line. Give yourself about 1 millimeter around everything with a sharp, fresh X-Acto knife. And when you lay these down, you're then obviously going to use some kind of a microsol, microset, or some kind of whatever decal solution you like to let them set. And then you're obviously going to hit these again with another coat or two of varnish to get rid of any potential silvering, and you're going to be good to go. But I would highly recommend, if you're going to do this kit, that you print out your own decals, make your own decals. They're easy to do. Guys, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And you'll be good to go. And so I was very, sort of happy to do that. We'll be good to go. So Now it's just a question of finish sanding, and we're going to, as I said, go from 400 to 600, get everything nice and glassy smooth. Everything's going to be hit one more time with primer, so I know that everything is sort of where it wants to be and it's nice and clean. I'll do one more test fit just to make sure I've got everything where it needs to go, and then we will set about painting this. Now I'm going to use Mr. Hobby colors, black and white, on here. They are enamels, and I've done a couple of test shots with them, primarily on the first coat of the cockpit seats, and I'm really happy with what I'm getting. It's got this kind of sheen to it. It's not a gloss, but it's got a really nice sheen to it, and it's nice and hard. And what that means is that this is really going to take washes really well. And I'm going to really, once I've painted the inside panels black, I'm going to go to town on this with some dry brushing and some washes, just so that it pops inside the cockpit. So that's primarily what the colors are. There's a few others. There's some aluminums and some gunmetals that I'm going to use. I'll use those and dry brush also the guns and get those all cleaned up, and then get some washes on those before I break these off of their sprue and set them in the gun emplacements. But it's coming together really well, and I'm really pleased with it. So again, fit is one of the big issues. Take your time, get everything lined up, make sure you're all ready to go. Any pop marks you see, don't worry about your panel lines. If you can salvage some of them, do so. If not, get rid of them and make your own. That's perfectly fine. There's plenty of reference photos, so you're not going to get lost. And it's not difficult to make panel lines. There's several things on the market to make panel lines. Here's a panel line maker. This particular one is from Tamiya, and this is a good one. Squadron sadly are out of business now, but some of their tools are still available at hobby shops and online. This happens to be the Squadron version of it, and that works quite well. And as can a good scalpel as well work. But you're going to have to take your time and be very, very careful, because panel lines, if you're not careful and your blade slips, you're back to square one in terms of puttying it up and getting it smooth again. But it's not the end of the world. So that is it. That's where we are. That's my update. I'm getting very excited about this kit. It's coming together really well. And I would say overall, if you stick with it, it's probably a 3-week build. But there it is, part 2 of the bubble ship from the motion picture Oblivion. This is a Randy Cooper model. Information on how to reach Randy is in the description below on the previous episode, and I'll put it on this one as well. Okay, guys? As always, please be well, be safe, build something, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.